welcome back to Dystopia Now. I am Kate Willett,
I'm Emil Torres.
and today we're going to be talking about true freak Bryan Johnson. A lot of you have requested this episode, and we are going to get into that momentarily.
This was a fun one to research.
I'm hoping that by the end of this episode, I will learn how to live forever.
Maybe spoiler alert, there is no way to live forever. And it strikes me as kind of odd that Bryan Johnson, he claims that we're on the verge of superintelligence, right? But his focus when it comes to living longer, increasing his longevity, is purely biological. So it would make more sense if he was like, actually a much better use of my money, rather than spending it on, all of this biomedical research, is just to dedicate it to helping accelerate the development of AGI. Because once you have AGI, pretty much everybody in Silicon Valley believes then you get immortality, right? You could just upload your mind to a computer. So from the very start, I'm a little puzzled by his whole approach, but we will discuss this more in a moment.
Yes, I wanted to bring up two things today. The first one was there's this crazy article in
Yeah.
Wired that I was going to share with listeners in the comment section, or the further reading section, I guess. And it was this article about this woman. Her name is Lauren Bai. Hopefully I'm pronouncing correctly, but the spelling is B-I. And she's a VC in San Francisco Bay Area. And she decided to hire a surrogate to carry, actually she hired two surrogates to carry her, she called them twiblings, or I guess that's the term for it. Twiblings, it's like twins, but they're each from a different, like they're not in the womb together. Basically, she's hiring two surrogates.
I see,
And
yeah.
and so apparently this surrogacy idea is becoming a very big deal in Silicon Valley. One of the quotes in the articles is talking about surrogacy, and there's another VC called Sheil Monat, who is a venture capitalist friend of the original woman, Lauren Bai. He has also commissioned twiblings, and these people are complaining. This is a quote. He said, "The problem is that the information is siloed, quote, each agency has their own database of wombs." End quote. In this model, surrogates are the gestational equivalent of Uber drivers or Amazon warehouse workers. There should be a database of carriers allowing us to filter on what we want: age, BMI, willingness to abort the fetus, Monat said. So they're already going into this with this idea that, like, basically they're just doing the gig economy, but for gestating a pregnancy.
Yeah.
And so this
yeah.
woman, who they refer to in the article as Rebecca Smith, that's not her real name, she has some terrible health complications during the pregnancy that lead to a stillbirth. So there's no evidence at all that the complications are related to anything Rebecca Smith, the pseudonym for the surrogate, did. She had a horrible situation. There's actually some evidence that this was caused by a health problem in Lauren Bai's family, or in her husband's family, that, like, this was actually, something that they genetically passed on. But so she has a stillbirth, and then Lauren and her husband spend over $1 million suing the surrogate, completely ruin her financially. She's already the mom of a 7-year-old boy. They do things like they harass her kid, her 7-year-old. They skip out on her medical costs. They post her name on the internet and all this, like, just horrible stuff. They try to drive this poor woman who was doing them this incredible favor for not very much money. The pay that she was getting was like $45,000, which I was looking up for, like, surrogacy. The pay is usually capped somewhere around like $60,000. It's like $45,000 to like $60,000. And then, the intended parents, the people whose genes it is, like, they're supposed to they're supposed to cover all the medical bills, or like time missed from work, and just basically, but like, it's an extremely unregulated industry, and there's basically no recourse because of the lack of laws around it that surrogates have. Most of these women who are doing it because they want to help people have children. They're not, the money is like you can make as much money in a entry-level admin job. It's not great pay, you know? I mean, I'm sure to some people $45,000 makes a really big difference, but I mean, like, in terms of like other things you could do for that amount of money, most of the things that you could do for $45,000 are not life-threatening in any way. Whereas like with pregnancy, you can have, you know, terrible health complications that include like death, like organ prolapse, diabetes, thyroid issues, lifelong joint pain, pelvic floor damage that just completely makes you unable to function sexually or be, you know, it makes you incontinent for the rest of your life. Like, it's very serious. I'm not trying to talk people out of having kids if they don't want to, but it's just the kind of thing that I don't think someone would do for the money alone. Like, you have to have some other motivation, whether it's wanting to have a child yourself or you feel strongly for some reason about helping other people have a child through surrogacy. But these Silicon Valley people, this article outlines that basically they see this as like a new form of, it's a new market that is going to like allow for their natalism, you know, to just like mass produce literal human babies without having to do the work of even carrying the pregnancy themselves. And the way they talk about the women who are doing this for them, it's just so fucking dehumanizing. It made me so mad.
Yeah. If you're a wealthy person in Silicon Valley, then once the child arrives, you know, you like Elon Musk, you know, he's not spent much time with his kids. So even once the kid is there, you sort of offload further tasks of raising the child, you know, by hiring, you know, nannies or whatever. So that situation is completely shocking. And also, one of the first things that came to mind was the possibility that there are some individuals who perhaps would take the risk for the money. Like, in other words, would be primarily motivated by the pay because, you know, the economy is not great. There are regions, particularly like in poor regions of the US, where individuals basically support themselves, or at least a sizable portion of their income comes from giving blood.
Yeah,
Right?
wow.
So my first thought was, I wonder if some of these surrogates are in a similar situation, or like, okay, maybe, you know, it's worth sacrificing my body and taking risks in order to get, you know, $45,000 over the course of 9 months or whatever.
Yeah, I think that it's interesting because that's not market price. Like, the market price
Yeah.
for this would be way, way higher actually, because there are way more people who want a surrogate than people who can find a surrogate. It's limited, so, you know, I don't know exactly what the like supply and demand price would be, but it's way lower because of the regulations around surrogacy. Like, you're actually not allowed to pay someone to carry your child. It's considered human trafficking, but you can pay
Yeah.
all of their medical expenses and you can provide something of a stipend.
Yeah.
Now, I would actually, like, on the one hand, when I first read this, I thought this should be completely illegal. But I actually, having kind of learned a little bit more about it, I think that it probably should be legal and highly regulated to offer the most protection for surrogates. Like, the balance of power needs to be shifted dramatically in the direction of the gestational surrogate, the person who's actually carrying the child, because right now they're assuming almost all the risk. Like,
Yeah.
these VC people were able to skip out on their responsibility for medical bills. They were able to sue her into oblivion, basically, because they were like these wealthy VCs and, you know, could spend like $30,000 or even $1 million. Like, they were just blinking. And then, you know, this woman, she's the woman that was actually carrying the baby. She was this, you know, working class mom, and she didn't have the money to lawyer up in the way that they did, you know, and she's also assuming all of the healthcare risk. Like, the woman with the twiblings, basically, so one of them was a stillbirth, but the other woman who was carrying the other baby of this woman, Lauren Bai, she ended up having terrible health complications as well, and ended up having to have a hysterectomy to save her life. So she can't even have more children of her own, even if she wants to.
And there goes at least a portion of the money she made.
Oh yeah,
Right,
and they
yeah.
skipped. Oh, and then they skipped out on her medical bills as well. Basically,
Yeah.
they put the money for that woman into like an escrow. That escrow company failed. And so basically, like, that woman, it looks like, didn't even get paid.
Hmm.
And with the surrogacy rules, like, you got to hand over the baby no matter what. So
Hmm.
basically, there's right now a very high risk of people not getting, like, doing this, but like not even getting paid, not even getting their bills covered, going into
Yeah.
massive medical debt for a child who isn't theirs, having lifelong health complications that there'll be no coverage for. I mean, it's just crazy. I think, like, the minimum price for something like this should be like $500,000 that you should
Yeah.
have to pay literally no matter what. And like, this is just the US side of it. I was reading about surrogacy in India, and it's even way more exploitative. There's a
Hmm.
really important book by an author named Sophie Lewis called Full Surrogacy Now, Feminism Against Family.
Hmm.
And basically, in the book, Lewis really outlines the surrogacy industry as it exists within India. She makes other arguments as well, that basically, like, what she calls all gestational labor should be taken seriously as a form of labor. Like, we are expecting people
Hmm.
to do this without compensation, obviously, especially if it's their genetic child. Like, we're
Yeah.
asking people to bear so much risk, like, without being compensated, without really being helped and stuff. So the argument of Sophie Lewis's book is way beyond just, hey, look, the surrogacy industry in India is very fucked up and exploitative. But that was certainly something that I took away from it. And if they ban surrogacy in the United States under any circumstance, like, these crazy VC people are just going to take it abroad and exploit people in other countries even way more. So I would argue for something that is legal but like highly, highly regulated, with the law dramatically in favor of the person who is actually taking on the pregnancy.
That sounds totally reasonable to me. I think
Ugh,
I'd agree. Yeah,
it's
because I
so
mean,
fucked
this
up.
story is just, yeah, it's utterly fucked up and really tragic. I cannot imagine what that woman is going through
Yeah.
in the aftermath of, like, not just the tragedy of the stillbirth, but yeah, all the financial penalties.
It's nuts. Well, and there was harassment even of her child. Like, the VC woman, Lauren, ended up sending a picture of the stillborn child to the surrogate's son, who was seven
Oh
years
my
old.
God.
Was like posting private information about their family online, hired
Yeah.
a private investigator to look into who the surrogate was having sex with and if it was rough sex. I mean, it was just completely fucking nutso.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I
anyway,
didn't know about this sort of thing at all. So thanks for putting it on my radar. And I mean, I wonder if this sort of thing will become even more common as a result of Silicon Valley pronatalism,
that's what I
right?
think
Yeah.
will happen. And I was thinking about, why is this article published in Wired, other than the fact that it's, like a VC woman who did this crazy, terrible shit. But I think it is because the pronatalism in Silicon Valley is going to start to move in this direction more and more. Like, it's already somewhat common to use a surrogate,
Mhm.
but it's becoming, I think, more and more common, and like something that they, discuss among themselves or whatever. And it could, I don't know. Like, these people
Yeah.
need to be
Yeah.
reined in. They are psychopaths. Um,
Yeah.
so speaking of,
Or they all need to move to their network state,
yeah, yeah.
where there's no restrictions on this sort of thing.
Yeah. Although I
Yeah.
feel like it is possible that there's only going to be two or three people with uteruses in that network state.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Great point. Yeah.
This is like, I don't see a lot of women going there. I don't see a lot of queer people going there. I'm not sure how it's all going to work out. So, all right. So the other thing I wanted to mention before we get into today's main topic is that we're recording this on the day of the Abundance 2025 conference. And when I saw this, I felt very vindicated because, as listeners know, if you're new to the podcast, just to back up a little bit. So Ezra Klein and Derek Thompson co-wrote this book called Abundance. And we're not really talking about the book on this show as much as the giant think tank apparatus and tech billionaire funding apparatus behind it, pushing these ideas. And a lot of the
Mhm.
abundance discourse online is about housing, is about deregulating zoning so that we can build apartments in single family home areas. And I'm not against that. I actually think that that's probably like a fairly good idea in most circumstances. However, this whole thing just struck me as the world's biggest smokescreen. I don't actually believe that these tech billionaires give a fuck about zoning. I really don't. I don't think that that's their main interest. I have thought that their main interest was kind of two things. One, you know how like the Koch family maybe 10 years ago put in a bunch of money to like campus free speech activism, like they funded like student groups, and it's not so much that they actually really care about like, oh, the woke college students, the blue-haired feminists. What they wanted to do is push a worldview that was going to get a lot of people involved in right-wing politics for the first time. And 10 years later, as we look at the impact of that, as we listen to Theo Vaughn and Joe Rogan and President Trump and Vice President Vance, we see like, oh yeah, like they made a good bet. Not necessarily, I mean, it's interesting because the Kochs, I don't think were pro-Trump at some point, but it did push a lot of people to the right. Like this idea that there was a crisis of speech, even though it's like, yeah, there were some excesses of quote unquote wokeness. Like I met really annoying people when I went to UC Berkeley. Certainly, there were some people that were using this kind of social justice language as an excuse to just be a bully because they liked being mean and this was a format. So I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but like I don't think it's a major problem. And like spending I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but I don't think it's a major problem. And spending years on promoting this as like some, serious issue, it did have a political impact far beyond free speech. I think that that's kind of what's happening with abundance right now. There are like astroturf student abundance groups showing up. But another thing I thought, in addition to like, hey, billionaires don't really care about zoning, like what is the tech billionaire interest in removing land use regulations? Well, obviously there's the nutty shit that they want to do with network states, but just putting a pin in that for a second, what a lot of these guys want to do is build nuclear power plants, and nuclear power plants are something that most people do not want in their backyard. Like, and their whole plan for AGI, AI, it takes these like massive data centers and just like so much energy usage. Like we don't even have the capacity now, but we especially won't if all their plans for 10 years from now come true. So I think I have thought that it's about land use regulations with regard to nuclear, and also just promoting a deregulatory framework as it pertains to everything, but especially AI. And when I saw the list of topics that are going to be covered at this conference, I felt so fucking vindicated. I'm like, this is exactly what they're doing. Here are some of the topics. I will read them to you. NIMBY, nuclear in my backyard. Will AGI create abundance? Finance, the missing pillar of abundance, American energy abundance. Will Democrats vote for abundance? Technocracy versus market dynamism. Of course, that is something that Mark Andreessen talks about a lot. Philanthropy that builds. There we go. Until the EA worldview, and I just, and also there's a lot of like kind of the Democrat focused stuff. There's the future of the Democratic coalition. Will Democrats vote for abundance? So this is specifically a project about astroturfing the Democratic Party in particular. But if you look at the think tanks that are actually sponsoring this, they're not necessarily liberal think tanks. We have the American Conservative Coalition, we have the Center for Public Enterprise, the Foundation for American Innovation, which worked on Project 2025. We have, some others, but in terms of funding, they have Open Philanthropy, of course, the EA organization, the Pacific Legal Foundation, which is a super anti-tenant legal firm that landlords hire. We have the Stand Together Trust, which is the Kochs, the Chamber of Progress, that is a pretty right-wing organization. So, I think that it's this definitely, I think it becomes more and more clear, not to toot my own horn, but that I am right, that this is an attempt by tech billionaires to move the Democratic Party rightward, especially as it pertains to their goals with AI and nuclear power.
So maybe you could publish an article with a similar title to Matt Iglesias's recent post, which was sometimes I'm right about things.
Well,
Something
actually,
like that.
I think actually Matt Iglesias was publishing that article in response to one of our former guests, Nathan Robinson, wrote an article
Yeah.
called
Yeah.
I believe it's called Matt Iglesias is confidently wrong about everything. And if it's not called
Yeah.
that exactly, it's called something very similar. I'll link it in the comments. But I think that was Matt actually clapping back at the title of a previous article. I think Matt has been wrong about some extraordinarily visible things like the Iraq War,
Yeah.
but he also said that Sam Bankman-Fried was definitely for real. He,
Yeah.
he's promoted cryptocurrency. He said that like to connect with voters, Kamala Harris should loosen up the crypto regs. Okay, I don't really think
Yeah.
that that's about voters, bud. I don't think that the voters are clamoring for crypto deregulation. I think that that's your fucking weirdo venture capitalist friends like Mark Andreessen.
So I think all of this amounts to what could be a pretty compelling argument for people to pay attention to Matt Iglesias,
Yeah.
right? Because if he is wrong, like consistently and reliably wrong about stuff, then it makes sense to pay attention to what he's saying and then think the opposite.
Yeah, no,
Right? So in a sense, like he may be like a really good like barometer of what is true, and
yeah, he's like a reverse oracle or something
Yeah,
like that.
exactly.
I mean, it's interesting because in some ways Matt is just a complete fucking idiot. Like he's wrong again
Yeah.
and again. He's
Yeah.
racist. He hangs around with all these fucking weirdo race science people who just say horrible, horrible stuff like Anania. You think, how can this guy have a fucking career? Like he's an asshole. He's wrong about a lot of stuff. He is a racist, very likely, or at least his associations and his words would lead me to think so. But he's uncancelable because his funding is from these tech barons, and
Yeah.
other people who think just like him. So it doesn't matter if you and me like him. It doesn't matter if he's ever right about anything else again. His function is to tell these tech people what they like to hear and to keep the Democratic Party from being pro-worker,
Yeah. Yeah, and so he's got a megaphone from them,
Yeah.
right? Because this was one of the questions that I asked Nathan Robinson when we had our interview with him, which is why has he been able to build a career given that he is reliably wrong about so many things? He's just this. I mean, I guess maybe he's not alone in this sense. I mean, there's one might say, shit rises to the top.
Yeah.
In many cases.
Yeah.
And so he's not the only one who consistently gets stuff wrong, but it is just kind of astonishing and frustrating. And also, I think it reflects poorly on our particular moment right now.
Yeah.
Where you do have these like many of the most prominent voices out there are bullshitters.
Yeah. Oh, and Matt is such a fucking bullshitter. So is everyone that works for that stupid publication, The Argument. I mean,
Yeah.
there was real who's who of speakers who work for The Argument on this abundance conference. We had Derek Thompson. We just did an episode on The Argument on our Patreon a couple weeks ago, but basically
I thought it was really interesting.
it was really interesting. And we talked about it in relation to effective altruism. But anyway, go back and listen to that one. But just for now, this argument is it's like a centrist liberal abundance publication that is astroturfed by all of these like centrist groups and tech billionaires and stuff, and the funding list is like truly so fucked up. I'll link an article about it. But in terms of like people who are affiliated with The Argument at the Abundance Conference, Derek Thompson, who is obviously the co-author of the Abundance book. We have John Arnold of Arnold Ventures, who is a former Enron executive, and like during that period of Enron, and he's one of the big funders of The Argument. We have looking through Jerusalem Demsis, who is the editor-in-chief of The Argument. Samuel Hammond. I don't think he works for The Argument, but he's worked at like a ton of these abundance think tanks. Like he's been at like four of them.
He was at the Niskanen Center.
He was in Niskanen. Yeah.
I knew him back in the day when he worked for the Niskanen Center.
And he's a weird EA guy, right?
He is. He was a part of this very small and elite group of EAs in Washington, D.C. that for a little while I was a part of. I'm very embarrassed to say.
I want to know so much about this. Like,
Do you know who else was a part of that group?
was it Derek?
Gabe Bankman-Fried.
Wow. So did you
Yeah.
hang out with these people?
So yeah. Gabe, I don't have any clear memories of chatting with him, but I spoke to another person who has since also left EA and is now vociferously critical of the whole EA ideology. And he mentioned that in many of the EA group meetings that we had in DC in somebody's apartment, Gabe Bankman-Fried was there, but he was very quiet. He sat in the back. So it's entirely possible that I was in the same room as him at one point and just didn't realize it. So
There was a weird person that I hate. Like, there's a person that I've hated online, just one of these abundance people. And I'm about to say something that could, if it were wrong, get me like slapped with a lawsuit. So I won't say his name, but I will say that I have always hated this guy. He's not famous or anything. He's just like a random asshole on the internet. And Nick, who we had on the show on the Hasbro episode, was talking to me and telling me that like when he was in this researching this EA group, there was like one person that was particularly enthusiastic about eugenics and race science shit. And I was like, oh, who was it? Just in case. I knew I didn't think I would. And he says this guy's name. And I was like, I fucking hate him. And like, nobody in the world even knows who this person is. Like, he's like, why do you know who that guy is? This is just a random person. It's not a celebrity, not a pundit, just like a weird asshole on the internet. But I just feel very vindicated because so many of these slime balls, they do end up having such horrible views that definitely come out. But speaking of views, we do need to leave some time to explore the wonderful world of Bryan Johnson. So let's transition to Bryan Johnson. Who is he? Why? I think we've all seen him online for his he was in. I guess, he does like these like life extension supplement commercials and stuff. Like, what is his deal? Who is he?
he's got a whole company called Blueprint,
Okay.
which sells which sells products aimed at extending one's lifespan, right? So increasing longevity. And I got overly excited when we first started the episode. But yeah, so what I was referring to when we began our chat was that he is pursuing biological immortality.
So let's give like just a quick
Yeah.
little background of like who Bryan
Yeah, sure.
Johnson is. Okay, so he's a venture capitalist.
Yes, he's a multimillionaire. I think he has something like $400 million.
Yeah, he's very rich. Here's a fun fact. He was born in Provo, Utah, and he went on a Mormon mission with the Church of Latter-day Saints. He went to BYU. He has had a number of business ventures, including one called Braintree.
Yes, and by the way, he was Mormon until the age of 34.
Oh my God.
Yeah, so he was, raised Mormon and stuck with the religion until his 30s and then left, and that kind of, it complicated his relationship with his family. There's a documentary out there called, one second.
Don't Die, The Man Who Wants to Live Forever.
Yeah. So I watched that.
Wow.
And it's clear that there's a lot of pain underlying his endeavor to live forever. His dad says that when he was young, he had aspirations of being somebody like Joseph Smith. Right, so the prophet of the founder of Mormonism.
One of my friends is an ex-Mormon, and she told me all of this stuff about Joseph Smith that is just so funny. Like, Joseph Smith, sorry for our Mormon listeners, you can cancel me, but Joseph Smith seemed like he was just a monumental grifter. And he said that there were like some scrolls that said that he was a prophet, and then other people were like can we see these scrolls? And he's like, no, I lost them. Just kept doing that his whole life. Just having all these wives. And it's like, oh yeah, babe, I swear I'm a prophet. It's like God who told me to do this. But just basically said that the evidence existed that justified this, but refused to ever show anyone and just kept putting it off. I think that's so funny.
Yeah, I think most religions are pretty strange.
Yeah.
I mean, I would say that about not just like theistic religions, but the secular religions that have been sprouting and growing in Silicon Valley.
Yeah.
A lot of them are really weird, but I think Mormonism is one of the truly weirdest. I mean, you're totally right. Like he claimed to be able to decipher these old tablets that he discovered by using a seer stone, looking into a hat.
Wow.
And at some point,
Carney. What a carney. He's a carney.
And this is a guy, by the way, who, as I recall, was arrested. I think it was for fraud or something like that. You know, listeners can double check me on that. But he was arrested at one point, so he had this like criminal record, and and then he made this claim, and there were skeptics in his immediate social circle who said, well, to prove that you're actually deciphering these old tablets, what we want you to do is decipher them a second time, and we will compare the original manuscript that you wrote, you transcribed, with the second one, and he refused to do it.
Oh my
right?
God.
So that would have been an obvious way to prove that he's not just making it up. So Mormonism is really, really very strange.
It's really strange.
Yeah.
And so is Bryan Johnson. So just a couple other of the like basic facts about him. The main way he made his wealth seems to be a company called Braintree. It was a web payments company that he sold for $800 million in 2013. And after he sold that, he parted ways with his wife. He left the Mormon religion. And then in 2021, he announced Project Blueprint, which was an effort to reverse his body's aging process. So I think that's probably what we'll spend most of the time talking about. But like, man, this Wired article that I'll post in the comments is fucking crazy. I'll just read one very small section. The reporter, whose name is Katie Drummond, says to him, I'm going to ask you a very simple true or false question that you can answer however you want. Ready? Bryan Johnson says, yes. Katie says, true or false, you, Bryan Johnson, the man sitting across from me, one day, at some point in the future, will die. And Bryan Johnson says, false. He's a true believer. True believer.
He talks in the documentary about how he went through a period, I guess this would have been in his 30s, where he was basically suicidal. Right, he wanted to die. He literally says, like, what I dreamed of is no conscious experiences anymore. Right, and I think you have to pay attention carefully when watching the documentary. But a sort of narrative emerges that he was a kid who had great ambitions. He wanted to be a prophet. Basically, he wanted to be the leader of a religion.
Kid, pursue something reasonable like acting, like a Hollywood career, you know? The profit market is way too crowded these days.
I knew someone when I was younger who said that their ultimate goal in life is to found a cult. And I still think about that on occasion. But basically he had this period where he was like pretty suicidal, and then he, I think, just discovered a way to achieve all of those goals that he has had throughout his life. Because his whole like don't die movement is kind of a religion, right? I mean, there are people who have jokingly referred to him as Health Jesus, right? And he doesn't like shy away from those kind of messianic descriptions. He really sees himself as this like incredibly important figure in human history. The individual who's going to push the boundaries of what is scientifically possible in terms of achieving immortality. He'll be the one who folks 100 years from now will read about in the textbooks. So he spends about $2 million every year on anti-aging interventions. He takes So far, he's taken about 33,500 images of his bowels. He's discovered that his
Oh,
eyelashes are shorter. Yeah, exactly. He's probed the thickness of his carotid artery.
what's
He
that? Where's
takes
the
it
carotid artery? Sorry, I'm not a medical
right,
person.
no, right in the neck.
Okay. Yeah,
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 so
that's the
those are,
one that when you like slash someone's throat, you're slashing that. I've
yeah, yeah,
never
yeah.
slashed
So
someone's throat, nor will I. Just saying. Yeah.
you don't know that from personal experience. Yeah.
No.
That is the crucial artery that provides blood to the brain. And he takes about 130 pills in total per day. Would you like me to read you a schedule of his day as it was presented in the documentary?
Yes, sure. But I do want to say before we
Yeah.
do that, that I am so fucking glad that the wife was able to peace out before all of this.
Yeah.
Like, this would be a hard life for a woman. But so, yes, let's hear his schedule.
Yeah. Johnson, by the way, has 3 kids, only one of whom speaks to him. Part of that is because of the Mormon religion, right? They don't look fondly on someone who leaves the faith.
Yeah.
But the other son who shows up in the documentary is not too shy about describing his dad as like kind of a weirdo.
Dude, I mean, my dad is a mild hoarder. He's
Yeah,
got like a bunch of boxes around with like really old receipts from the 70s. And I remember when I was like a little kid, I thought that shit was weird as hell. But
yeah,
I got off so easy. I really did.
yeah,
So what about my dad's garage full of receipts? Who fucking cares? He did not spend $2 million a year on life extension.
yeah. Johnson also says that he's been on a number of dates recently, but that women have found him. I don't know. This is my interpretation of it. Have found him a little bit off-putting. He's explicitly told them, I live an unusual lifestyle, and I'm difficult to be around. I'm hard to live with, etc." So since his divorce, he's not had another partner since then, and he says he probably won't. So yes, it's good for the wife who escaped, and good for the women who went on dates with him and realized, maybe this is not exactly what I want.
So, okay, what's his schedule, you're going to say?
Yeah, so he says that he does 100 different things every day in order to extend his lifespan. He starts off in the morning with a specific light that replicates sunlight.
Okay, well, I
In order
have
to.
one of those, the UV light, or maybe I have some light that is like sunlight. Like that's not that weird.
It's not that weird so far.
Okay, and yeah, I guess it's doing 100 things instead of choosing two. You know?
Yeah. So that's just the first item on the list.
Okay.
So after he does that, he takes 3 pills. Then he takes his temperature. After that, he has some kind of like auditory or hearing therapy, which he uses to, this is what he claims at least, stimulate his parasympathetic nervous system, which is the part of the autonomic nervous system that enables you to relax.
It's the rest and digest. Yeah.
Exactly.
It's the rest and digest instead of the fight or flight, which is good. Like this is for, there's some scientific basis in this, that it's better to spend more time in your parasympathetic nervous system without being in that fight or flight response.
Yes, but I'm not so sure there's much scientific basis for this particular therapy,
Yes.
quote unquote,
Totally different.
actually triggering your parasympathetic system.
I mean, the most scientific basis I could see is that, like, yes, listening to relaxing music probably does help you be in your parasympathetic nervous system,
I don't even think it's music.
Oh, wow.
I could be wrong, but I think it is like a certain kind of sound or something like that that's supposed to trigger a calming response. I haven't looked into that in detail, but if it were music, I think he would have said that.
Okay.
So then he takes 54 pills, after which he puts on a cap that has all of these different laser points, which are supposed to stimulate hair growth. By the way, he does not have gray hair, but that's because he dyes his hair.
Okay.
Then he works out for an hour, after which he eats a few pounds of vegetables, and then has high-frequency electromagnetic stimulation of his abdomen. Following that, he has 12 minutes of red light therapy, audio therapy for hearing regeneration, last meals before 11 a.m. So we're just at 11 a.m. at this point.
Okay. Wow.
And then he has 34 more pills. And then he says that there are various protocols throughout the day, here and there. I'm more or less quoting from the documentary. And then he has his nighttime regime, which the documentary doesn't go into detail about. But basically, there are people who have described what he does as basically like a full-time job.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And the thing is, he would claim that it's not just about him living forever, but what he's doing is a kind of humanitarian or philanthropic service for the rest of us, right? Because he's making himself a guinea pig. In fact, there's a really long history of self or auto experimentation within the field of medicine, where people literally like poked and prodded themselves and did all sorts of really weird stuff to determine like the side effects of medications or the consequences of certain kinds of infections and so on. But the problem is that what he's doing, despite what he claims, has almost no scientific value.
Wow.
Right? Because there's no control. It's just one individual. You really need a clinical study involving like thousands of people where everything is nice and controlled. And there's just one intervention at a time to determine the efficacy of that intervention. Whereas what he's doing is like, hundreds of different interventions, taking all of these different pills and vitamins, doing that, electromagnetic stimulation of his abdomen. He's even received gene therapy.
Wow.
In order to supposedly to extend his life, because I think there were studies with mice that showed that this could potentially enable one to live longer. Guess where he went in order to get this gene therapy?
I'm going to guess Prospera in Honduras. Did I get it?
100% correct. Nicely done.
I don't think there's that many places in the world where you can get illegal gene therapy. Yeah. Yeah.
Funnily enough, when they followed Bryan Johnson walking around Prospero, I don't think I saw a single woman, except for his assistant, who he brought with him.
Okay, so let's back up just a second
Yeah.
for folks who are just joining the podcast. So Prospera is a special economic zone in Honduras, and basically they have like a kind of libertarian area that the rest of Honduras law does not apply to, and then a bunch of like tech bros, Bitcoin bros have built like a libertarian city there where like you can just basically do whatever you want. And one of the main
A mini utopia.
and one of the main purposes of it is like to have like all these like weird biotech companies that are doing forms of experimentation that would be illegal in the United States, or procedures that have not been tested enough, but also like they're able to have zero regulations when it comes to like construction, and you pay for everything in Bitcoin, and it's basically like kind of the exact type of thing that you would think that these people are into. We'll do a whole episode on Prospera perhaps sometime, but that's the basics of it.
Yeah, and this is part of a broader network state project.
Yes.
Right. And so this is another topic that we've discussed on the podcast with Gil Duran in particular. That was one of the earliest podcast episodes we recorded. And Bryan Johnson is a fan, is an advocate of the network state idea.
Wow.
From our perspective, so if there are any new listeners, we are very critical of the network state idea. It's deeply problematic in all sorts of ways. It's, it has the backing of a number of tech billionaires.
I just want to live in a normal democracy. And look, I get that there's problems with democracy, but like, I think it's good when you have a city council and a school board and shit, like, I would like it to be all more like socialist and whatnot, but these network state bros are just crazies to me.
I mean, one thing that came to mind when I was watching Bryan Johnson in Prospero is
Prospera. Feminine prosperity.
Thank you for the correction.
You're welcome. Yeah, we're all here to grow. Yeah.
That's what us philosophers would call a thinko.
Okay.
Analogous to a typo. Prospera.
I get why you thought it was going to be like bro-like. I do. Yeah.
The people in the documentary, as well as I watched other interviews with some of these people, they're really excited about the fact that that there aren't regulations there that are constraining and restricting what they're able to do. But I wonder the extent to which they're bringing in medical equipment to Prospera from countries that have regulations,
Yeah.
right? So even though there are lax regulations in this little mini utopia, they're relying on technology that is reliable precisely because there are very strict regulations in the countries that are producing and manufacturing all of the medical equipment that they're using. They're benefiting off of all of the regulatory apparatuses in other countries while saying, oh, look how awesome our little libertarian fantasy world is here, where we don't have to worry about regulations.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, it's really crazy. Like, if you go online, I'll link it in the comments, but there's like a video of Patry Friedman, who's Milton Friedman's grandson, and one of the sort of main figures in this network state movement from the way back seasteading Peter Thiel. Like, Patry Friedman is getting a Tesla key and plants it in his hand. Anyway, so Bryan Johnson, fucking weirdo. I do want to say there was an article about him not too long ago in the New York Times called How Bryan Johnson, Who Wants to Live Forever, Sought Control Via Confidentiality Agreements. So basically, he makes his the employees of Blueprints sign these like wild confidentiality agreements that they're not allowed to talk about anything pretty much, and they're backfiring because like some of his workers have banded together to challenge him. At least 3 former employees, including a former fiance who worked for him, so he has had some ladies in his life, filed complaints with the NLRB, the National Labor Relations Board, about the confidentiality agreements that he forced them to sign, and that basically, he was, they accused him of saying that he was violating federal laws that protect workers who want to speak about workplace conditions. So this guy seeks a lot of confidentiality for himself and his own weirdo longevity stuff, but he doesn't, this guy talks about like his own process a lot. Like, he's out here talking about like his bowel movements and whatnot, but he doesn't want his employees to be able to talk about anything.
Yeah, and his erections.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. Yeah. Okay, so let's get into the erections for a second. What did you learn about the boners of Mr. Johnson? Yeah.
He keeps track of his nighttime erections. For individuals who have that apparatus down there, you get erections at night, and it's healthy. Bryan Johnson keeps track of how many erections he gets, etc., in order to, this is yet another data point that he includes in his like broader effort.
And isn't he keeping track of his son's erections as well?
I don't know that. I
think he's keeping track of his like young adults, or possibly even minor when this started, son's erections, to compare how his nighttime boners are matching up to his like 30 years younger son.
I wouldn't be surprised. He has had blood plasma transfers with his younger son. And he's actually given blood plasma to his father.
And so this is the only son who speaks to him out of the two.
Exactly.
Well, you can't say that the other two made the wrong choice. Yeah.
I find there to be something somewhat off with him in this, like he's a kind of unctuous character. I think that there are times, like in the documentary, for example, that he comes across as kind of a nice guy who's pretty sincere. And like I said before, it seems like, under the surface, he is very hurt in many ways. And he clearly has like a lot of death anxiety, even though he claims he's not afraid of dying. He says he just wants more life.
He has a shirt that says, like, don't die. And wasn't he the host of, like, the Don't Die conference?
Yeah, I mean, that's his movement.
Don't die.
Yeah, don't die. And so there are moments where he comes across as kind of a sympathetic character, but for me at least, his behavior raises some red flags. So he's on social media a lot. He's a businessman, right? He's made
Yeah.
hundreds of millions of dollars. He understands PR and marketing. So he knows
Yeah.
every time, when the Netflix people showed up to film him, he's very aware that this is an amazing opportunity to promote his brand. Don't die, be like me, take my supplements, including
Yeah.
my olive oil. So I'm pretending I'm him, including my olive oil, which is literally named snake oil.
Yeah.
And so ultimately, one way of understanding his whole thing is that he wanted to be the founder of a religion and he wants to make a lot of money and gain a lot of power. Well, his whole company, Blueprint, right, which is marketing all of these products to his growing fan base, does exactly that. It provides him exactly that. And he says in the documentary he has never in his life been happier. And I'm watching this thinking, yeah, I'm sure that there's never been a point where he's been happier because he's got more money, more power than he ever had. He's basically famous, right? He's got all of this, and he doesn't seem like the kind of guy who is that gets that upset about like negative press. Like he just wants
Yeah.
people to talk about him. I mean, there's somebody in the
Well, I
documentary.
don't know because he makes these people sign these fucking insane confidentiality agreements. Like not just his employees. There was this, in the New York Times. There was a mention of how he went on a date with a woman and they took acid together, and he required her to sign a confidentiality agreement. So
Yeah, yeah.
I think this person is worried about negative press.
So I think he wants control, right?
Very
And
much.
what I mean in
Yeah.
particular is that if there's an outlet that describes him the way we have as a weirdo for wanting to
Yeah.
live forever and for, taking all these pills every day, I don't think he is bothered by that. He likes the attention. I mean, there's even somebody in the documentary who describes him, surprise, as a narcissist, right?
Oh, for sure.
For sure, right? I mean, anybody who wants to live forever, I want to live forever. Me, there's something narcissistic about that. At least one could argue that there's something narcissistic about that. So, anyways, yeah, he runs this kind of like, I mean, it's a snake oil, business. It's he's kind of a charlatan. He's gotten a ton of people to buy into his claims that this or that supplement is going to that he sells on his website is going to extend their life and so on. Again, like I think the most charitable read of what he's doing is that he is trying to push the envelope of human ignorance back, right?
Yeah.
So to help science progress, in particular longevity science. But the problem is that there is nothing scientifically useful about what he's doing.
So
Right?
let's spend the last few minutes here talking about his relationship with AI and his hopes for AGI, because I feel like this is another thing where this guy is really weird, and like he has connections to a lot of these other figures within Silicon Valley. Like he almost started a company with Elon Musk. I think that they know each other. Like, what's this dude's deal with his robots?
I'm going to paraphrase a bit. So he has argued that his "Don't Die" movement is that it's the only movement out there right now that rises to the occasion of our moment, right? Because we're on the verge of building godlike machines. And so he literally said in a speech that other ideologies, he mentioned wokeism, specifically conservatism, this and that, they don't understand the extraordinary, cosmically special moment that we're in, where we're about to transition to this new like digital era where we have artificial general intelligences that are, not just as quote unquote intelligent as us, but vastly more intelligent. So he sees the future as being intimately bound up and intertwined with the development of superintelligence. There's this good quote from him during an interview where he says, and I'm quoting him here, "The irony is that we told stories of God creating us. And I think the reality is that we're creating God. We're creating God in the form of superintelligence. If you just say, what have we imagined God to be? What are its characteristics? We're building God in the form of technology. It will have the same characteristics." And so I think the irony is that the human storytelling got it exactly in the reverse, that we're the creators of God and that we will create God in our own image. And in some other interviews, he literally jokingly refers to himself as Homo Deus, right? Of course, that's the title
Wow.
of, yeah, a book by Yuval Noah Harari, which translates as the human God or man the God, something like that. Um, so, yeah, he really believes that we're on the verge of creating and then becoming gods ourselves. Once we get AGI, then we can, delegate it the task of curing the quote unquote disease of aging. And maybe the AGI, because it's super intelligent, it thinks for like 3 or 4 seconds, says, okay, I know exactly how to do that. What's interesting is that I've not come across any statements of his about whether or not he imagines himself as an uploaded mind, right? So this brings us all the way back to the very beginning of our conversation, the very first comment that I made. There are a lot of people in Silicon Valley who imagine gaining immortality or what might be called cyber immortality through
Yeah.
mind uploading. And I don't know if that's how he envisions himself living forever, or if, in contrast, he will keep his physical body, right?
I
And
mean,
this,
when you were telling me about longevity,
Mhm,
escape velocity,
mhm.
that seemed like what he was trying to do. Basically, it seems like he's trying to extend his life through these weird drinks and vitamins until AGI is made, and then he will upload himself, right? Because I mean, or maybe he believes that he will live forever in his physical body, but
Yeah.
that's a big stretch, you know?
Yeah, so I think that's exactly right. I guess my point was that there are a couple options. One is you could accelerate the development of superintelligence, right? Because if you get
Yeah,
superintelligence like a year earlier, then you don't need to live a year longer to live
yeah,
forever, right? And the other option, like you're saying, is to achieve longevity escape velocity, right? So if you live long enough to benefit, if you get extra 2 years, then maybe during those 2 years, because of supposedly the exponential growth of science and technology, then after those extra 2 years are up, you get to benefit from the new developments, right? So then you can extend your life 5 years. Once those 5 years up, you can extend your life 10 years, and then 100 years, and then a million years, and so on. So there are a couple different options here. It just seems like I'm not saying that it makes more sense to focus on superintelligence. What I'm suggesting is that from his perspective, as a test crealist who's embedded in the tech culture of Silicon Valley, I would think that he would be more invested in like accelerating the development of AGI, because after all, a lot of people in Silicon Valley take that exact approach, right?
yeah.
They're not like, gulping down, 135 or whatever it was pills per day and electrostimulating their abdomen, et cetera. You
And
know,
their penis, he electroshocks his penis too. Not to be crass, but
yeah.
we have to talk about what it is, you know?
Yeah, so I think this gets at a really interesting split within the transhumanist movement, because there are some people who envision the future being wholly artificial, right? So they're going to
Yeah.
upload their minds, and or we're going to create these like autonomous AGI entities that are going to, end up usurping humanity. Another option, which is exemplified by Peter Thiel, is that no, what we're going to do is develop advanced AI and other technologies such as nanotechnology, synthetic biology, biotechnology, and so on. And we're going to radically re-engineer the human organism so that we keep our biological substrate, but we radically modify it and quote unquote enhance it in various ways. So ultimately, we end up looking very different, but we are still fundamentally biological, as opposed to this alternative, like purely digital vision. And so I'm trying to make sense of where exactly Bryan Johnson falls on this spectrum, because he seems to be siding a little bit more with Peter Thiel than with others like Sam Altman, who, Altman, as we've discussed before, has signed up with a company called Nectome to have his
Yeah.
brain preserved when he dies so that it can be uploaded to the cloud. He literally says that, and he believes that this will happen within our lifetimes. So that is a much more digital, eschatological vision, if you will, of the future.
Well, I have two things to say in response.
Yeah.
The first one is when Bryan Johnson's company tested his diet, like they had 1,700 participants in a study. I think they paid to be in the study.
Yeah.
That the blood tests revealed that it had horrible impacts on them. That they saw their testosterone levels drop. Some became pre-diabetic. A lot of people describing sickness, vomit, having heartburn. So I would be careful if this episode made you want to take his supplements. And then the last thing that I want to say is, in closing, we need to thank our Patreon supporters. So I
Yes.
just want to say thank you so much for being a member of our Patreon.
Thank you.
Please sign up. We are so close to breaking $1,000 in contributions, which has allowed us to pay an editor and begin to get our show on YouTube. And we're hoping to bring on someone soon who can help us a bit with marketing and video, getting the word out. So that's what we're doing with your contributions. Thank you so much. And especially thank you and welcome to Backwards Square Leg, Liz, Gigi, Kate, P0R3, Daniel, Meredith, Extraneous, Black Cat, Koshka, Belle, Amelia, and Chloe, who are our newest supporters. Thank you so much for joining, and we will see you next week.
Bye.